I'm going to focus especially on the question of who is the beast. And I know this is a worn subject, but I'm going back to it again because I think we are living in the age that this prophecy in particular is about to break out upon the world. I think we all expect that. But to have a better understanding of what is happening, that's what we are reaching for. Why am I looking at the question of who is the beast? Because the great crisis that is just before us is going to hang on the question of something called the mark of the beast. And I'm sure everybody knows exactly what the mark of the beast is. But I'm going to suggest to you that if you don't know who the beast is, then you can't really have a good understanding of what the mark of the beast is. So I want us to be sure that we have a good understanding of who the beast is. And like I said, I'm just wanting to go to the Bible and try to follow what it says there. We want to begin with Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. That's the chapter where it tells us about the beast, where we first get an introduction to the beast. And I'm speaking especially of the beast in Revelation. I believe Revelation shows us two beasts. There's one that appears in chapter 13. I think he appears again in chapter 17. And I think he's also mentioned in chapter 11. The second beast is also in chapter 13, and he looks like a lamb, speaks like a dragon. But that one is referred to later on as a false prophet. So I'm not going to when I speak of the beast, I really mean the first one, not the false prophet one, because that's the one I think the Bible specifically focuses on when it talks about the beast. Now it says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." So, we're going to look at the different elements, what God says here, and see if we can follow step by step, following the clues that the Bible gives us. First of all, what does a beast symbolize? We have the answer in the book of Daniel in 2 verses. It says in verse 17, and these are things we know. I'm just going through this to kind of refresh our minds. "These great beasts, which are 4 kings which shall arise out of the earth." God told Daniel that a beast represents a king. But in verse 23, he goes a little further, clarifies it a little more, and he says, "Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces." So we are told that a beast represents a kingdom. I'm going to say a bit more about that in just a moment. But generally, when God says a king in the prophecies, he's actually speaking of a kingdom most of the time. A beast is never used to represent an individual person. There are many people who believe that the beast is going to be an individual who arises and brings about the great tribulation and so on, an individual man, a person. But on the basis of what the Bible says, a beast represents a kingdom. And a little bit more than a kingdom, which I will point out in just a moment. But when God says a king, he means a kingdom. What does the sea symbolize? Well, we are familiar with the verse in Revelation chapter 17 and verse 15 where it says, "And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." Now the beast rises up out of the sea. And the other beast later on rises up out of the earth. So there's a contrast made between earth and sea. Sea represents, or waters represent, multitudes, peoples, nations. But I'm going to suggest something else. And you'll be able to follow me as we go through and see whether it makes sense. I'm going to suggest that the sea also represents, it symbolizes the old world or the biblical world. It's not just multitudes of people. It's multitudes of people in a certain location. That's an important point, and I want you to think about it. Because Every time it mentions beasts rising up out of the sea, just think about the prophecy and see what part of the world it is talking about. It's always referring to the old world. You never see a beast rising up out of the sea in the new world. So I think the idea of the sea, it represents more than simply multitudes of people. It's also pointing to a certain geographical location, a certain part of the world. You can take that or leave it, but it's something I believe is worth thinking about. And I think it has relevance as we continue in studying the prophecy. Now, I want to make a point about beast kingdom versus horn kingdom. If you look at Daniel 7, or if you remember what it says in Daniel 7, it says a beast rose up out of the sea, the fourth beast, and he had 10 horns on his head. You remember one of the horns came up, one horn came up that plucked up 3 other horns. And what do the horns represent really? Kingdoms. And the beast represents a kingdom. So we say beasts and horns represent the same thing, but there has to be a difference. And if you examine it carefully, you'll discover that a beast is not simply a kingdom. A beast is really an empire. A beast is an empire. It's a kingdom that contains other kingdoms within it. So I'd like you to make a note of that. A beast always represents an empire. The prophecies of Daniel make this clear. I think you can look back at history and you can see Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, Rome. They were more than simply single kingdoms. They dominated and took over other kingdoms and incorporated them into that kingdom. So they were empires, really. So a beast is a bigger kingdom than a horn kingdom. So a beast is an empire, while a horn is simply an individual nation kingdom when it represents a kingdom. Sometimes it used to represent an individual person as well. But basically, it's a single individual, an individual nation kingdom, while a beast is an empire. I think it's important to remember that. Now, in the book of Daniel, in Daniel 7, I'm just laying some general background ideas. We see a picture of Satan's political empires. Now, notice the word political, because one of the things we have done is we have, perhaps, I think, incorrectly labeled the beast as being religio-political. I think if you look at the beast, the primary meaning when God shows us a beast is he's speaking about a political empire. And the beast represents, the great political empires, the great empires of the world have always been Satan's tool, always. The seat of Satan's power in this planet is always the greatest political empire. That's where Satan always works. That's what he always uses to try to destroy God's people. Go back and look at history. And you'll find that every time God's people were on the verge of being exterminated, there was always some massive political power behind it. And Satan has always worked through great political powers to try to subdue and to dominate and to destroy God's people. And I'll say some more about that, but just take my comment there for the time being that these represent Satan's political empires. Satan may work through a little country like Cuba or maybe Jamaica, but they're not significant in his scheme of things. He more focuses on nations that have great influence, like the United States, okay, like Babylon, Greece, Rome. These he could use to carry out his purposes on a massive scale in the planet. So, these beast kingdoms represent his great political agencies. And of course, most of them, if not all of them, I think all of them were ultimately empires, kingdoms that dominated and ruled over other kingdoms. Now, when you come to Revelation 13, I believe you have the same picture. You have Satan's political empires illustrated in Revelation. Now, in the book of Daniel, you see those empires illustrated by 4 different animals. But in Revelation, instead of 4 different animals, you have one animal that incorporates all 4 of these animals, plus a few others. In other words, what you are looking at in Revelation, I'm saying it and I hope I can demonstrate it. What you are looking at in Revelation is the sum totality of Satan's empires over the ages. I have a good reason for making that suggestion. I'll bring it up in a moment. Let me repeat. The beast in Revelation 13 is a sum totality of Satan's empires over the ages. In other words, this beast is like a panorama. We say he's a composite beast. I say a panorama because in this day and age, most of you will understand what a panorama is. You use a camera, you can take a panorama photo. You understand? You take 5 different shots and your camera stitches it together and makes one picture. A broad, wide picture that has 5 different photographs incorporated into the one picture. It's called a panorama. It gives a pretty good idea. What God does is he takes 7 different shots of what Satan has done over the ages and he puts it in one beast. So the beast has 7 heads. But it's one beast, it's one entity, it's one great power that Satan has worked through over the ages. We are concerned about how this beast operates in our time. But it would be foolish to think that this beast only exists in our age, because God tells us clearly he has existed for a long time. I'm going to show you where he says it. In Revelation 17, we see the clues there. It says, the 7 heads, that's the 7 heads of the beast, are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. Some translations say, and they are. And I tend to lean to that translation. That's my bias, right? You may not like that. And they are 7 kings or 7 kingdoms. 5 have fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So what we see is that these 7 heads represent 7 kings or 7 kingdoms. I would say 7 empires. Because horns represent small kingdoms. But a head is a stage of an empire. Every beast has a head. A beast with 7 heads is simply the same beast in 7 different stages. It's 7 empires, but God represents everything in one picture. And he tells us here, because he says, 5 are fallen. The 5 that are fallen, do they exist at this point in time? No. 1 is not yet come. Does that one exist? No. So how many exist now? At any given point in time, the beast has only 1 head. So at any given point in time, the beast is effectively that head. But it's one great empire, one great satanic empire with 7 different manifestations. So God shows us the true picture. He takes us behind the scenes and shows us 7 different heads. And he makes us know it's a panorama because he says 5 are gone. 1 is, and 1 is still to come. So we should understand the beast is not simply one entity in this particular time. If we can understand the broader picture of the beast, we can begin to better identify who the beast is and come to grips with some of the things that the Bible says about the beast. Now, so we have 1 head is gone, 2 are gone, 3 are gone, 4 are gone, 5, and the present one, that big head in the middle, is supposed to represent the one that is. I'm not sure that this is exactly how John saw it, but this is my perception of it. And then 1 is not yet come. And that one that is not yet come is to remain for a short space. Now I just want to link what Daniel saw with what John saw so you can get the picture more clearly. Daniel saw 4 animals. John sees 1 with 7 heads. If we say the heads represent empires, then obviously there's a discrepancy between Daniel 7 and Revelation 13, because Revelation 13 shows you 7 kingdoms and Daniel shows you 4. But we know there's a connection because when you look, you see that the head of the beast is like the mouth of a lion. The mouth of a lion, and the first one in Daniel 7 was a lion. And then it has the feet of a bear, and the one in Daniel 7, second animal, was a bear. And the third one was what? A leopard, and this beast has the body of a leopard. God is linking the 2 visions together, and he's saying, what you saw in Daniel 7 is represented here on this beast. But there's more to this beast than you saw in Daniel 7. In Daniel 7, you only saw 4 animals, and you say, why? Why does this beast have 7 heads and there were only 4 in Daniel 7? And some people say you have to start where Daniel started, with Babylon. But you ask the question, why did God start with Babylon in Daniel 7? When you go to Daniel chapter 8, where does he start? Medo Persia. You see a ram and a he-goat. There's no lion there. Why doesn't he start with Babylon in Daniel chapter 8? Because Babylon has already passed from the scene. In the book of Daniel, God is taking you forward from where Daniel exists. From Daniel's point in time, he goes forward. He's not going backwards. But if in the book of Revelation, he's showing you the sum totality of Satan's work right through the ages, then he has to go back past Babylon. Have you understood what I say? Right, you don't have to agree. I just want to know you're understanding my reasoning. Because I think the beast in Revelation 13 here, I think it goes back past Babylon. And I think it goes way back to the first kingdom, the first nation that Satan ever used to try to destroy God's people. Before we come there, you notice that in Daniel 7, on the head of the fourth beast, the little horn came up and began to wear out the saints and persecute the saints. So you look at Revelation 13 and you say, where's that little horn? Well, actually, that little horn is not represented in Revelation 13. And I'll tell you why I say so, because everybody is convinced that this beast in Revelation 13 is the same as that little horn. It's the same papacy. But let's look at something else that I think will illustrate what I'm saying. In Revelation 17, you have what I believe to be the same beast represented. I'm pretty sure it's the same beast because there are not two beasts in Revelation with 7 heads and 10 horns. There are not two end-time empires with 7 heads and 10 horns fighting against God's people. It's the same empire, the same kingdom that you see in Revelation 17 is the same one in Revelation 13. And in Revelation 17, God makes us understand that the papacy, the Roman Catholic institution, is represented by a woman riding the beast, not the beast. The papacy is a woman that rides the beast. It is not the beast. That is very clear from Revelation 17. The only way you can, I was discussing this with somebody in Jamaica. And he's so determined that the beast in 13 is a papacy. I said, well, who is the woman riding the beast in chapter 17? He says the woman in 17 is the same thing as the beast in chapter 13. But the beast in 17 is a completely different entity. I was blown away. I said, so you're telling me that there is a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns riding a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns in Revelation 17? And he said, yes. Okay. Well, I can't sympathize with the reasoning, but I can understand it. If you are determined that Revelation 13 has to be the papacy, you can't get away from that conclusion. This woman represents the papacy, the Catholic Church, a major. You can't have the papacy without the Catholic Church. You can't. So if this woman is a Catholic Church, which I think most of us, I don't think there's anybody who would question that. If this is so, then who is the beast? Because later on, you find out there's a separation between the beast and the woman, very clear. She's riding the beast, but she's not a part of the beast. She's controlling the beast. She's influencing the beast. She's dominating the beast up to a certain point in time, but she is not the beast. So, the little horn in Daniel 7 is represented by the woman that rides the beast. So she is there in Revelation 17, but she's not there in Revelation 13. Now, the question I would like to ask is, who is the 7th head? That's a question that, look, I would say for 30 years I've been trying to find an answer. Because everybody studies Revelation 17, and you hear 1,000 different ideas. And they all have their validity, but I'm trying to find an answer too, and I'm thinking, who is the 7th head? Because the Bible says when it comes, it must remain a short space. Some people say it's the United States and other things, but I have reasons why some of these things I can't agree with, and I'm going to point out 1 or 2 of these things. Now, I believe that you have to go back to the first nation that Satan ever used to try to destroy God's people. Because if you're looking at the sum totality of Satan's work in this world against God's people, you have to go back to the very beginning. And what was that first nation? Egypt. You can't get away from Egypt, right? If Pharaoh had had his way, the nation of Israel would have been totally wiped out. When Pharaoh made the decree that the firstborn should be put to death, it was essentially a death sentence for Israel. The Israelite nation would have died in its infancy. God delivered the Israelites, but Egypt was at that time an empire. It dominated and ruled other nations. Egypt was one of the early empires that dominated over there in the old world, in the biblical world. And you can tell that just by reading the Bible. Egypt comes up so many times as a massive power in that part of the world. The next nation that dominated and that, well, they not only tried to destroy, they were very successful, was Assyria. Many of us may not know that Israel was divided into two parts. In the days of the son of Solomon, Rehoboam, he was a foolish young man. Listen to young people instead of older people. His father Solomon taxed the people mercilessly. I suppose you have to do that if you have 700 wives, right? He taxed the people mercilessly. And when he was dead, his son Rehoboam was taken to be made king. And the people said, listen, your father made life hard for us, so you tell us what you are going to do. So he went to the old men, and the old men wisely told him, look here, tell the people that you are going to make things easier for them. He went to the young men, and they said, listen, what you need to do is show these people that you have a firm hand. Let them see that you are not somebody to be played with. Tell them, your father chastised them with whips, and you will beat them with scorpions. Tell them that your little finger will be thicker than the leg of your father. So he went and told them. And of course the people rebelled, and they said, what have we to do with the house of David? And 10 of the tribes broke away and formed a different kingdom, which came to be referred to as Samaria or Israel. It was the northern kingdom. But the other people, those from the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, they stayed with the house of David. And also the Levites, who were the priests, they never had anything to do with the inheritance of the other tribes. They also went over. So it was Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. They formed the nation of Judah, which was the southern kingdom. But the other 10 kingdoms, they got a man named Jeroboam to rule over them, and he led them into wicked apostasy. All the time you read about those 10 nations, it was apostasy upon apostasy, till eventually the Assyrians came against them and took away the whole nation. All 10 tribes took them away captives, and nobody knows where they are to this day, except Herbert W. Armstrong. He says, you people are the lost tribes. He says they became the British and the Americans. Very convenient. So I think that the second power that Satan used was Assyria, and very successful they were, I would say. After Assyria, the Babylonians came against the remaining southern kingdom of Judah, and Babylon took away Judah into captivity, devastated the nation, slaughtered the young man, the old woman, killed everybody, and took away the rest to Babylon as captives, and left only some old, weak people in the land to keep it, and they took them away for 70 years. They were followed by Medo-Persia, and it was the Persian king Cyrus who actually allowed the Jews to go back to their land. But it was also in the time of the Persians that the king made a decree that nobody should worship anybody except the king, Darius. And you know how Daniel nearly lost his life in that. And it was during the time of the Persians that Haman got the king to sign a decree that they should go out and kill all the Jews. You remember? Haman eventually got hanged on his own gallows. But because one of these Jews would not bow down to him, Mordecai, he got the king to make a decree that they should go out and slaughter the Jews. So they also tried to wipe out God's people. But you can go through, you can see Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. All of these nations were used by Satan to dominate, decimate. The Romans eventually wiped out the Jewish nation, took them away as slaves, took them out of their homeland and scattered them among the nations. Not only did that to the Jews, but also persecuted Christians, burned them alive, threw them to wild beasts. It is said that the Emperor Nero used Christians, dipped them in tar, and used them to light his garden at night. The great persecutions of not only Jews but Christians took place by the Roman Empire. So I believe these represent the first 6 empires. The 5 that were fallen were Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, and the one that was Rome. Now, I'm not putting the papacy in there because I don't believe the papacy was ever an empire. What the papacy did was influence kingdoms. The papacy has been a great influence in getting nations to do her bidding. But she was never an empire in the sense of a political empire that controlled nations and dominated and had armies that warred and conquered and no, it was never that kind of kingdom. And what the Bible shows us is that she rides the beast, not that she is the beast. So, the question would be then, who is the seventh head? That has been the question, but I'm going to come to that in just a moment. You ask yourself the question then. Look at the old world. We are talking about old world empires. We have not touched the new world yet because the old world is a biblical world. When the Bible says that after Babylon, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to the other. We have preached that there never again will be a kingdom that rules the world after Rome. And we are right. Because the world has changed. It doesn't mean that there never again will be a dominating power in Europe. But now, if one power were to take control of the entire old world, it would still not rule the world. Because now the world has expanded to take in the New World, the Americas, Australia. So you never again will have one power that dominates the entire planet like Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece did it. So you never can have one kingdom ruling the world. But it does not mean that there would not arise again in the old world, in the beast kingdom, another dominant power. So I'm looking and I'm trying to find, where is there another empire-type kingdom in Europe after Rome? And finally, it struck me, and I may be wrong, but is there a government today that controls almost all of Europe? What is it? The European Union. I never realized until Britain pulled out of it. And I saw a video explaining why Britain pulled out. I never understood that this European Union is not just a trading bloc. It's a government that controls all the nations in Europe. I never knew how completely it controlled Europe until I saw this, until Britain decided to pull out. Because Britain pulled out because they are being governed by people and policies that they have nothing to do with. It controls and dominates each country. And each country is run by the policies of the European Union. They tell each country how to operate. They have their own parliament, they have their own court that everybody has to submit to. And I realized, actually, there has emerged another power in Europe that controls entire kingdoms. It's an empire, but it's an empire in disguise. It's not as clearly identifiable as the old empires used to be. It came about in a different way, but it exists. And the Bible says this seventh head would remain for a short space. And that is true of the European Union. It's just a baby in terms of global politics. And it can't last much longer because the Lord is on his way. So it will remain for a short space. And let's see if we can look at how things tie together. The 10 horns. Let me touch on the 10 horns. So the seventh head I am suggesting is the EU. Like I'm saying, I'm not setting any of this in stone. There are ideas that come from reading the prophecies. And I'm hoping by saying this, you won't come down on me too hard if you disagree. I'm trying to back up myself here. Now the 10 horns. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So, at least at the time of the prophecy, these 10 horns did not yet exist. They had received no power, so they were not yet. There were no crowns on the horns at that point that the angel was talking about. So, sometimes you see pictures of the beast, and in almost every picture, you find that each head has a couple of horns on it. It's incorrect. These horns belong on none of the heads of the beast. because the horns don't arise until all the heads are gone. It's after the seventh head. Then the beast himself becomes the eighth king. Now there arises a kingdom. The beast emerges without any one power controlling the beast. So the European beast, whatever he's going to be in that final incarnation, he has no head. In the final incarnation of the old world beast, there is no head, because the seven heads pass and the beast emerges as an eighth king, but he's a king without a head, because the seven heads are gone. And 10 horns will emerge at that point, who will give their power and their strength to that beast as the eighth king. Now that's fascinating, because you're thinking, what kind of power is going to arise in Europe that has no single controlling power, but at the same time it's going to work in such a cooperative way? 10 nations, whether it's a figurative or a literal thing, I don't know, but 10 nations in the whole world will give their power and their strength to that beast entity. So they have received no kingdom as yet, so they are not yet kings. Okay, they have not yet emerged, but later on they do emerge, and the horns will be crowned. So when you look at the beast in chapter 13, the 10 horns have crowns, because you're looking at the entire history of the beast. But in chapter 17, when God zeroes in and gives us a snapshot, we are looking at the beast at a particular point in time in chapter 17. There are no horns yet. Okay, so you look at the reason why there are crowns, some places there are no crowns. I'm just trying to explain that. Now, here is another important point. Why does the beast mirror Satan? By this I mean, look at Satan and look at the beast. Look at the similarities. The dragon is Satan, right? Now the dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast in 13 has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast in 17 has 7 heads and 10 horns. Same beast. The dragon is said to be a great red dragon. We are not told what color the one in chapter 13 is, but the one in 17 we are told is a great scarlet colored beast. So he has the same kind of color as the dragon. I believe, of course, the one in chapter 13, although it says it has the body of a leopard, it's a red colored leopard. That's what I believe, because it's the same beast in 17. So it's the same kind of color, I believe. Also, you notice that the dragon has 7 crowns on his head, but the beast doesn't have crowns on his head. Instead, it's the horns that have crowns. And how do I explain this? Satan is shown as having 7 crowns because you're looking at his great empires. But the beast being the tool, he only has 1 head at one time. So God doesn't show you the heads being crowned. What is significant is the sub-heads or the sub-kingdoms within each empire. So he shows you the crowns on those empires depending on what time they receive their authority. I'll move on from that point. Can the beast represent Satan himself? Some people say the beast is Satan. I think that's really unreasonable, because God does not confuse himself nor confuse us. If he says that a beast is a kingdom and the dragon is Satan, he's not going to shift suddenly and make the beast into Satan. The beast is his tool, is Satan's tool. It's not Satan. God uses clear symbols and explains clearly what the symbols mean. Furthermore, it tells you in Revelation 16 and verse 13, and I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet are 3 separate and distinct entities. None of them ever is the other. The false prophet is never the beast or a part of the beast. The dragon is never the beast or a part of the beast, and vice versa. There are 3 distinct and separate entities. The dragon is Satan. The beast is the old world empire. And the false prophet we'll look at in just a moment. Now this is the hard question. I suppose I've already given my opinion as to why I say this, but let's look at it a little bit more. Churches are represented by women. God is not confused, and he's not intending to confuse us. If we say that this is the way the symbolism works, we should be consistent. Churches are represented by women. That's God's chosen symbol. That's God's ordained way of depicting churches. Kingdoms and empires. Kingdoms are represented by horns. Empires are represented by beasts. God is consistent. He doesn't confuse us. Sometimes there are reasons why it is said that the beast is a papacy. There are reasons, and there are good reasons. I'm not denying that. And I'm going to look at that a little bit more, but I'm saying that if you stick to God's definitions, then you're going to see why certain things just don't fit. We have to change those definitions. We have to say churches are represented by women, but sometimes by beasts. Kingdoms are represented by beasts, but sometimes it represents religious institutions. You get confused, and you begin to twist and distort and to bend it to suit your bias instead of listening to what it says. Now, again, later on in Revelation 17 it says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire." So the beast and the woman are going to be separated. As a matter of fact, the friends of the beast who have given their support to the beast are going to turn around and decimate the woman. But the beast will remain healthy and fat and flourishing and doing his work. But the woman has been devastated. So the beast and the woman, the beast and the Catholic Church are not the same. When she is made naked and desolate and her flesh is burned and she's eaten, the beast will remain. The beast will be right there at the end. Right there at the end, because it says in Revelation 19, "And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army." This is the coming of Jesus, Revelation 19. And the beast is there ready to fight him. Where's the woman? The 10 horns have already devastated her, eaten her flesh, made her naked and burned her with fire. She's not there at the end. So, it seems very clear to me that you can't confuse the beast and the woman. You have to make that distinction. Otherwise, you are going to be pushing your ideas into the prophecy, and they are bound to be false if you push your ideas on the prophecy. What about the healing of the deadly wound? Because, like I said, if I were in a different audience, I'd need to be much more careful but I know I'm with people who are already open-minded. You already stood against tradition. You have already been kicked out of churches, and you're not too afraid of thinking. So, I'm not just buttering you up. I really mean that. Now, the healing of the wound, we say, happened when the Pope was taken captive in 1798. It was healed in 1929 when the Italian Concordat restored temporal power to the Pope. I know all of it. But based on what we looked at already, what the Bible says is that I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and the deadly wound was healed. It doesn't say if the wound on the head was healed or it was the beast that was healed. Revelation 17 says the beast that received the wound by the sword and did live. It suggests that it is a beast that lived. If you chop off somebody's head, he's going to die. Not just the head. The beast appeared to be dead when the head was taken off. But the beast is what comes back to life. It doesn't say the head comes back to life. That's an assumption we make. Which head? Well, I would suggest that it is head number 6, because head number 6 is the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire broke up back in the 4th century. It was invaded by what we call barbarian tribes. And Rome as an empire ceased to exist. And as far as empires were concerned, it seemed like Europe had come to the end. No longer any one nation would dominate in that part of the world. Those days were over. The beast as an empire that controlled the world was done with. And never again would it arise. But the Bible says that something would happen to make the beast arise again. We know that over the ages, they have tried to restore the unity of Europe. Charlemagne, Napoleon, Hitler, Kaiser. Nobody succeeded. But maybe, finally, they have got something going under our noses and we don't recognize it. Because the European Union, there are 28 nations. When England pulls out, it will be 27. But I'll bet you there will be others coming in to take England's space. 28 nations make up the European Union. All of them controlled by one governing body. Europe has again emerged as a dominant power in the world, but also Europe again emerges as a unified force. So it seems to me that the wound of the beast We're not talking about any particular nation. We're talking about the European Empire. We're talking about the old world empire. That essentially is what the beast is, with different heads at different times. That empire has emerged again as a unified empire with a controlling head, and it is to last for a short space. Maybe England pulling out, maybe the beginning of the demise of it. I don't know. The next thing is the name of blasphemy. And of course, you know that the Pope is a blasphemer because he has been titled Lord God the Pope. He says he has the power to forgive sins, etc., etc. And we can prove what blasphemy is because when Jesus claimed to be able to forgive sins, they said blasphemy. And so we use these kinds of reasonings, and it's good reasoning. But one of the things I think we should note about the book of Revelation is that Revelation is predominantly written in the language and the thinking of the Old Testament. Predominantly. Okay? You can't miss it if you look at Revelation carefully. The sanctuary is there, the altar is there, Babylon is there, Egypt is there, the river Euphrates is there, the plagues are there, everything, the symbolism and the language is borrowed from the Old Testament. If you want to understand the symbols in Revelation, it's wise to start by looking at what it points to. Sodom, all of this. Look at what it points to in the Old Testament and what happened there. That's where you find the clues. And if you go to the Old Testament, you'll find that the understanding of blasphemy is a little different. I'll just give you one example here of what they considered blasphemy back then. In 2 Kings 18, verses 28 to 30, it says that the armies of Assyria came against Judah. Then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language and spake, saying, Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, Let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you out of his hand. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord, Yahweh, it's the name Jehovah he used, Yahweh, however you pronounce it, saying, Yahweh will surely deliver you, and this city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon. Syria, sorry. Hath any of the gods of the nations delivered at all his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and of Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah? Have they delivered Samaria out of mine hand? Who are they among all the gods of the countries that have delivered their country out of mine hand, that Jehovah should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? And Hezekiah goes to pray, and look at what he says. He says, And they said unto him, Thus said Hezekiah, Today is a day of trouble and of rebuke. In fact, he sent to Isaiah the prophet. And blasphemy, for the children are come to birth, and there's no strength to bring forth. In other words, the words of Rabshakeh, when he defied the God of heaven and denigrated his ability to deliver Israel, that is what they considered blasphemy in the Old Testament. It is when you raise yourself up to defy God and to say that God can do nothing to interfere with your purposes and your plans. This is the Old Testament concept of blasphemy. And I'm suggesting that we need to look not just at the New Testament ideas, but also at the Old Testament, especially when it comes to the book of Revelation. So I think that what we are being told is that there is a power. This power with the name of blasphemy is a power that defies the authority of God. Not just as the papacy did, but in other ways, which I will demonstrate in a moment. Notice also an interesting thing that I never saw before. Somebody pointed it out to me. Do you know that the name of blasphemy is not on the woman? Did you ever realize that? It's not on the woman, it's on the beast. When the person pointed it out, I said, no, it's on the woman. Then I went to look. No, Revelation does not say. It says the woman has a cup of her fornication, and she's a murderess. She has the blood of the saints. But there's nowhere where it identifies blasphemy with the woman. The blasphemous name is on the beast. So that's interesting. Europe. There's so much, but I'm just going to touch on this briefly. Europe, the European Union, has chosen as a symbol the Tower of Babel. I'm sure you have seen it, right? If you look at the logo, what it says at the bottom, Europe, many tongues, one voice. You know what God did at the Tower of Babel? He says, one voice, I split you into many tongues, because with one voice, you are going to defy God. You are going to rise up to the place where you rebel against God, and there'll be no stopping what you set yourselves to do. And so God says, I'm going to put a stop to this. So he split them up, and he divided their languages. Europe has chosen as its logo the Tower of Babel. The unfinished Tower of Babel. Yes, the unfinished tower, which is pretty amazing. This is a statement that says to God, to hell with you. We don't care what you think, and we don't care what you did in the past. We are going to go back to doing what you put a stop to. That is blasphemy. This is the European Parliament building. What does it look like? It's a Tower of Babel. This is in Brussels, Belgium. This is the Parliament building where the European Parliament meets. It's where the engine room of Europe is located. It's built like the Tower of Babel. This is not by accident. These people deliberately chose this symbol, which they know is a symbol of defiance against God. How do people do that? It's kind of amazing. It happens because that continent has reached a place where the knowledge of God means nothing. Europe is the most atheistic continent on the planet. I mean, America is trying to follow suit, but it's not there yet. Amazingly, whether by divine design or blasphemous intent, one of the most popular symbols of the European Union is a woman riding a beast. Yeah, it's a cow, right? But look at that woman with a crown on her head, and this woman, she's kind of scantily dressed. You can't help remembering the woman in Revelation 17 riding the beast when you look at this symbol. How do you do this and not see the similarities? Because God means nothing to whoever is behind this. On the cover of the German magazine, same symbol, a woman riding a beast. It's on the postage stamp of the European Parliament. It's on the money, the euro, a woman riding a beast. Anyway, there's a lot more to this, but I'm just showing you that Europe fulfills the Old Testament understanding of blasphemy. The European Union. Is the beast still a universal empire? I'm going to go past that because we discussed it already. It will never again be a universal empire. It will be an old world empire, but not universal because the world has grown bigger. Now, why the similarity in behavior between the beast in Revelation 13 and the little horn? That's the killer point. In Revelation 13, the beast continues for a time for 42 months. In Daniel 7, the little horn continues for a times and a half. The little horn persecutes the saints, so does the beast. So the conclusion, I think this is what forces us into the conclusion that the beast and the horn are the same. And this is what makes us kind of close our eyes to the discrepancies, because we say it cannot be any other way, because the description of what they do is too similar. But I'm going to ask a question that I think has helped me to resolve it in my mind. And the question is simply this: who killed Jesus? Jews or Romans? Good, exactly what I expected. 50-50. Some say Romans, some say Jews. In actual fact, it was both, right? Yeah. The Jews used the Romans. So they are equally responsible. And if you think about this, then it becomes easier to reconcile the little horn and the beast. The little horn, the papacy. Do you know that the Roman Catholic Church itself actually killed relatively few Christians? Itself. Do you know what it did was use the nations of Europe to persecute the Christians? When you talk about 60 million Christians, you think the Pope and the priest took swords and went out and killed people? Not most of the time. Sometimes they did. But most of the time they got the armies of Spain and France and different countries to go out there and slaughter people under the influence of the church. The church could say, I never shed innocent blood. Just like the Jews did. You know, we don't want his blood on our hands. But they were guilty of it. So in Daniel 7, we are looking at the work of the papacy in persecuting God's people, but it used the beast. It was the beast that did the actual dirty work, but the little horn is equally responsible. And I think if we recognize this, we can understand why it is that there's this graphic similarity between the work of the beast and the work of the little horn. But Revelation makes us know that they're actually friends. They're actually in bed together until the time when the romance is over, and they turn on the woman and rip out her heart. But until then, they're in bed together, but they are still not the same entity. So, we're just going to touch briefly upon something else that is very evident, and it's the beast that comes up from the earth. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, Revelation 13:11. And he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. As I said, this beast is also referred to as a false prophet. Now, it's very easy to identify this beast. I don't think any reasonable person can fail to identify this beast if we understand a beast means a kingdom. The moment we see the beast coming up out of the earth, we know we are not looking at the old world, because we already settled what the old world is, right? So we're looking somewhere else in the world, and what we are looking for is a kingdom that follows that fulfills the following specifications. It arises in the new world, not the old world, because it comes from the earth, not the sea. Secondly, it becomes the greatest empire in the new world because it's a beast. In actual fact, it has 2 horns. And horns represent minor kingdoms. Well, we say it represents religious and civil liberty, some say republicanism, and what is the other one? Whatever. But it also could be, if you are consistent, it could represent America and Canada. Maybe. Because it's 2 nations side by side that are almost brothers under one umbrella. Maybe. I'm not saying it is so. Just an idea I'm throwing out there that somebody put in my mind, actually. But this beast becomes the greatest empire in the new world. And even on the basis of those 2 specifications alone, you cannot miss it. There's nothing in the new world that can compare to America, not even remotely close. There's no question, no reasonable question that the second beast is America. Furthermore, this beast looks like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. Don't make any mistake about it. All over the world, you live in America, so you don't know how people in Jamaica and other places feel like about America. Look, they might resent America, maybe with good reason, but everybody wants to come here. Those who don't know what is going on, because for them this is paradise. It's where they can be free, they can make money, they can live the good life. They want to come here, right? They see America as a place where the good life exists. God gives you insight, and he says it's not the way it appears to be, because this beast has the heart of a dragon. Because Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, what happens? The mouth speaks. He speaks like a dragon. It's coming from his heart. Somewhere inherent in the belly of this country is a dragon's heart. And that's how God identifies it. The facade of the outward appearance is deceptive. But the true nature. The next thing you notice when you read the prophecy is that the second beast wants everybody to worship the first beast. So what we understand is America is going to be pushing the policies of Europe. Policies that originated in Europe, America is going to be pushing them. I tell you, I was in Europe recently. I was in Czech Republic. We went to the city of John Hus, Prague. And I tell you, we were to stay in a hotel the night, and we could not stay there unless we first brought our passports so they could identify who we were. We asked them, why do we have to produce passports? They said, the government has to know where you are every moment that you're in the country. Right? I felt a little bit of a chill. Now, America, we all live in 2016. You might not remember 30 years ago. But you know, there was a book written by a man named, I think it was George Orwell, wrote 1984. In 1984, he talks about a world in which every move you make, somebody is monitoring you. There are signs everywhere that say, Big Brother is watching you. He probably wrote this book about 100 years ago. He spoke about a world where you were like units in a system, numbers in a system. Nobody had any individuality. The government had taken over, and it was just like a machine running. You did not operate as people. You operate as ciphers in a system. And Big Brother had his eye on you. Look here. I see in America, when I come here, signs that say, if you see suspicious activity, report it. Everybody is encouraged to report on his neighbor, to watch his neighbor and report. Big Brother is watching you, surveillance everywhere. They're listening to your phone. They're watching your emails. Everything that this guy spoke about in 1884 is coming to pass here. America was a place of freedom. Europe was a place where there was domination of conscience, where you had no freedom to move on. It's still there in Europe. It was more socialist. It was more controlled than anything else. America was a place of freedom. If you think it still exists here, keep dreaming. The system is in place right now in this country for the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is a system where the government so controls everybody, it can dictate what you believe and what you are and how you behave, or it will take away all your privileges. That's the mark of the beast. And it has crept up on us incrementally. And I'm going to say something else. I won't say it yet, but I'm going to say it. I know I'm late. I'll take 5 more minutes, okay? This power is able to manipulate all the new world, and the old world too. I mean, I'm just identifying America. This power establishes a totalitarian government in the new world. That's what the second beast does. It makes an image of the first beast. It sets up a system in the new world that is an image of what has existed in the old world. Totalitarian, controlling, invasive, taking over your conscience, your religious freedom. It takes over. That's what the system does in the new world, and it was unimaginable in America until it began to happen. And there's a reason why it happened, and I'm going to touch on that in probably my most controversial idea, probably more like Brother Howard than my controversial idea. Because the last point is that this beast uses amazing events to persuade people. And we say, the Bible says these are miracles, calls down fire from heaven. And so we concluded we're talking about religious powers. And so Oral Roberts and Kenneth Copeland and these guys are going to call down fire from heaven. And Benny Hinn. But it hasn't happened. And I tell you, I don't think it's going to happen. Because it's contingent upon believing that the second beast represents Protestants, which it doesn't. A beast is a political power. One of the things that we have kind of ignored is that Revelation is dealing with symbolism. Everything in Revelation is written in religious language because ultimately everything is about religion. It's a conflict between God and Satan. But also it's a religious book, and it's viewing things from the religious perspective that God has. Everything is given a religious view. But don't let that blind your eyes to the fact that he's talking about political entities. So even worship, when it says that they worship the dragon, you think they're going to fall down and says, "Hail Satan"? It's not that kind of worship. It's a kind of worship like where they said, and they worship God and they worship the king. They didn't worship him. They simply showed respect and obedience. In the similar way, when it says they perform miracles, does it mean miracles are as we understand them, or should we look for a different meaning? Like I say, it's my most controversial point. You don't have to accept it, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. What is the purpose of the miracles? It persuades the people in America to set up a system similar to what is in Europe, right? What has America used to persuade you Americans to cooperate and go along with it? Huh? Thank you. Some people are on my wavelength. What has happened is that there have been terrorist attacks, there have been significant disasters. Everyone that has happened has made the government take a little bit of tighter control over the people. Now, I am not a conspiracy theorist, or I wasn't. It's not my nature. Okay? But I'm going to tell you, I've watched some videos about 9/11 that have scared me. Okay? I don't know if you have watched. It's just past logical reasoning to think that those towers came down by 2 planes crashing into them. I don't like to talk about these things because they are too controversial, but sometimes the evidence is too overwhelming to shut your mouth. The first time I was watching one of them, I couldn't think. I'm saying, no. Nobody could do this to their own people. It can't happen. Nobody could be this wicked. But then the question is, if people do this, what can be the motive? Why would they do something like this? But if you notice, everything that has happened, I don't know how many of them were genuine terrorist attacks and how many were set up or what are. But I'm telling you, every one that has happened, the cords have been drawn tighter. They have taken more and more control of the people. It has been another reason to impose something upon people, and you don't speak because it's in the name of national security. God knew what he was saying when he talked about the mark of the beast. I believe that there are things that have happened that would fulfill this idea of fire coming down from heaven. Not literally, but events of such a stupendous nature. They grab the attention of the entire planet. If you want to translate a miracle into political terminology, what we are looking at is extraordinary events of global visibility to amaze people. Okay? That's the idea. You don't have to take it. But I think it's worth thinking about. America was the first nation that ever exploded an atomic bomb. 2 of them, in fact. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Maybe that was the beginning of it. Maybe that was the beginning of where America began to say, listen to us. Maybe. I don't know. But I know that 9/11 was one of the most significant events in the history of the place we are today. 9/11. It was a turning point in the world. I know because I travel back and forth and I know how things changed after 9/11. So, I'm not going to say these are the miracles. I'm going to suggest that it is something that I think is worth considering, okay? Because we are in the age where things are happening. This camp meeting, somebody said, several people said, just stay with righteousness by faith because prophecy is too controversial. And I was very much thinking, why don't I do that? But then I thought, but God has put prophecy there for a reason. It's supposed to help us to have an idea of where we are in time. He put it there for a reason. So it's a part of what God wants us to know at this time as well, isn't it? So I'm going to just close off here. He deceives the world and those that dwell in it by means of the miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. He tells them to build an image of the beast. Now, I'm not going to touch on the mark of the beast, but what I want to say to you is that if our understanding of who the beast is wrong, if it is, I'm not saying it is, if it is, then maybe we need to think more carefully about what the mark of the beast is. So I'm going to leave it there and want to tell you that I thank you and appreciate you because you have been patient with me. And I've seen puzzled looks, but not infuriated looks. So that's good. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads with me as we pray.